With this being a three-day weekend, I think of an amazing three-day trip that I got to take about 20 years ago. It was with my parish's youth group, and we were going whitewater rafting. It was a river in Northern California that drained down the Sierra Nevada, and an absolutely beautiful location. It was a multiple-hour drive to get there, and when we arrived, we set up our tents right on the riverbank. We had guides, we had a whole guide company, in fact, that was taking care of us and had this beautiful campground for us. Well, that first afternoon, after we set up, we had a marvelous dinner, and then it was time for the instructions on how to do whitewater rafting. None of us had ever done anything close to this before. So the head guide started to talk about what it was going to be like. He said, first of all, you're going to have the best time of your life. Second of all, we have no idea what's going to happen. He said every day the river was different. There was a huge dam upstream, many, many miles, and they would release water from that dam in a way that was unknown to anyone downstream, unless it was going to be a hazard, of course. So one day they released a lot of water, another day they released a little water. And part of the fun of this for anyone whitewater rafting is that the river was different each day. So you could spend weeks doing whitewater rafting there, and every day it would be a different experience. So the rafters liked that that was the system. So the guide said, when you wake up in the morning, you'll be able to look out of your tent and see the river, and you'll be able to tell to a certain degree what kind of experience we're going to have. Okay, that sounds good. That's what we all sort of look into. That sounds interesting. And then he said, now, the other thing you need to know is that there are two rules that you always have to follow. One is to always wear your life vest, and the other is to always wear your helmet. Those are the two rules. Now, all of us can see that that made perfect sense. But adults were kind of thinking, there should be a lot more rules than that. Especially since we have a couple carloads of teenagers here. Shouldn't there be more rules? And so a couple of adults kept asking, well, what about this? What about that? How about this circumstance? How about that circumstance? What are the rules that we need to know to have the best, safest experience possible? And the guy was kind of glib, and the adults were getting kind of frustrated. Because the guy would say things in response to one question, well, just don't fall out of the boat. Or, yeah, try to keep as dry as you can. Ha ha, that's not possible. And the adults kept saying, well, what about this? What about that? Finally, the guy said, look, it's unpredictable. We don't know what the river's going to be like. We can't tell you how to do it, except to keep your paddle in the water at all times. And we're like, okay, that's interesting. Now, the adults were thinking, keep your paddle in the water at all times. That's a great thing to tell a teenager because that'll keep them occupied. Their two hands will be occupied, the oar will be in the water, the paddle will be in the water, and therefore they won't be goofing around. And I think the guy kind of saw that in the adult's eyes, like, well, yeah, that's for the teenagers, so it's not for us. And the guy went on to explain. He said, look, these boats, when they're going down the river, they're these big rubber boats with the air-filled sides. When they go down the river, they follow the contour of the rapids. They go up and down, and they're not rigid. So the front of the boat will be down, the back of the boat will be down, the middle of the boat will be up, or some other combination of them. And so if you try to simply hold on, you're going to be thrown out of the boat. That you simply grab onto the ropes that are at the sides, that really only there to pull the boat in and out of the river. If you simply grab onto those ropes, that boat will just flip right out into the river. The only way you'll stay in the boat is if you have your paddle in two hands, and that paddle is in the water, and you're pushing against the water to keep your body in the boat. We started paying attention to that one. Once we heard that part about flip you out, So the next day, we get in the vans, we drive many, many miles up the river, so we'll end up back at our camp. And I'm getting a little bit nervous as we look at how much water is coming down the river, and how much white water there is, and how bouncy there's going to be, how much there'll be flipping of the boat, and that sort of thing. And so we're at the shore, we have our life jackets on, we have our helmets on, first two rules are being followed. And the guide then starts to break us into groups, into the different boats. And he looks at me and says, okay, you're pretty broad-shouldered, and you provide a certain amount of ballast. Therefore, you will be in the very front of the first boat. Now, okay. But I'm thinking, I can't cheat by watching other people. I'll have to it'll just be me and the river, trusting the guy who's in the back is steering us properly, and everyone else is paddling properly and all that stuff. So we start to go, and it's very calm. Of course, they have us go into the river in a very calm place so we can practice. And so we practice how to turn left and how to turn right, how to turn ourselves all the way around, and all that sort of thing. And it's like, okay, we can do this. And then we start going down there. And sure enough, the river starts to get rougher, and I can feel the boat almost with its own mind saying, get out. Flip, flip, flip. And my instinct is to simply grab on to anything there is. But I remember rule number 3, keep your paddle in the water. And so I realize that's not as easy as it sounds, because the boat's moving, the water's moving, and so I have to really pay attention to what the water is doing and where it is, particularly because I'm in the front of the boat. So I started putting my paddle down at one point, and the water's gone. Oh, the water's over there. I put my paddle down over there. So I'm having to really focus on the water. And then I feel myself starting to be lifted out of the boat. And I think, I gotta get my paddle in the water. So I do. I have to look a little bit. There it is. Fortunately, it's pretty much right in front of me. It's in the center instead of the sides. And I push down with all my might, and I realize I can straighten my arms and put my backside back down in the boat. Oh, this works. So we continue to go down the river, and I'm getting a little more confident. Push myself down. I hear the command, paddle right, paddle left. I'm doing all that fine. And then people get a little overconfident. They start getting tossed out of the boat. They get a little bored. They get a little off focus, out of focus. And so every once in a while, we have to practice all our turns and turn around and go upstream and pick someone up. And again, the guide said, you took your paddle out of the water. You took your paddle out of the water. And people say, but I was just holding on. Yeah, when you try to just hold on, that's when you get tossed. And then we had that most glorious moment when in the boat next to us that had the other part of our group in it, we saw the guy get tossed. He didn't have his paddle in the water. He had gotten distracted looking at something on shore, and so the water moved away from his paddle. The boat flipped up a little bit in the back, and he was tossed. So everyone maneuvered, we picked him up, no one was hurt. It was a fantastic experience, exhausting but wonderful for 2 days of doing it. And I think of that experience over and over in my life because it is such a fantastic metaphor for the Christian experience, for the Christian walk, for the spiritual journey. Because there are a number of features here. One is that when life starts to get tough, we tend to grab on to what we know. We tend to grab onto those ropes on the side of the boat so we don't get tossed out. I think that translates into real life where we tend to grab on to what's worked before. We tend to grab on to the practices, the prayers, the perspectives that have gotten us through white water, have gotten us through difficult times in our past. But that's not going to work. Because part of what Jesus is talking about in this morning's gospel is that all the rules and regulations that good, faithful people had developed leading up to the centuries of Jesus' birth were not going to work every single time for the rest of all eternity. Instead, people had to pay attention to what their lives were really like at any given moment in order to know how they should behave. That certain washing of vessels and hands were not going to make someone's heart pure if their lives were in such disarray that didn't make sense to them. And the same thing is true for us today. That if we try to pray the same exact prayers we did 20 years ago and expect them to have the same power and impact today, they may or may not. Sometimes what was old, sometimes what was traditional, sometimes what worked before just isn't going to work now. Another dimension is that the water was always changing under the boat. It wasn't just always the boats at the same level in the water. Sometimes the water would be lower, sometimes it would be higher, sometimes it would be above my head, sometimes it would be way low. And so to keep contact with the water, I had to really pay attention. And that's the other secret, technique, crucial learning about the Christian walk, is we have to keep paying attention to what life is really like, what's really happening now. Not living lives of denial or wishful thinking, but instead being brutally honest about, is the water rough or is the water smooth? Are things going well or are things difficult? Because then we can respond. Then we can respond to what's actually happening and work in concert with God, in partnership with God, to get through whatever it is and to make it better for everyone in the boat with us. And then the last thing is that pattern. Staying engaged in the water. I think of that as God. That if we don't stay connected with God, we get tossed out of the boat. If we don't stay connected with God, life ceases to make sense. If we don't stay connected with God, we have little chance of getting through the rapids of life without bruises and cuts. That God is in fact with us all the time, just like the water's always under the raft. But it's up to us to stay connected. It's up to us to keep our hearts and minds open to God's love and inspiration. And if we don't do that, we're going to get tossed to and fro. But if we do that, we can get through the roughest of times with a certain amount of ease, with a certain amount of security, and with a lot of success. It may not be what we expected, but we'll be safe at the end of it. The metaphor could go on and on. But the main thing for me is that I have to stay connected with God, especially when life is rough, and not expect what's worked before to work now, but instead listen acutely, carefully, intent faithfully to God to hear what will work, to hear what I am called to do, to be, to become, in order that not just my life, but the whole wide world can be a better place. That's what Jesus talks about throughout the Gospels, the prophets, the Hebrew Scriptures, what we are called to do today, to stay engaged with life, to stay connected with God, and be ready for the new things, the new ways of being that God is offering us, to get us through the rough patches, to get us through the difficult times, to have lives of joy and peace and even safety. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.